Risen. As you know, Andre is an NFL superstar, Super Bowl champion, and Ramesh is his attorney. The D. Miller Law Firm is doing a lot of the NFL litigation. Their firm's over in Texas, and thank you so much. I'm going to let Ramesh take over here. Thank you.
All right. Well, I know most of you looked at the calendar of events and probably saw Andre Rison speaking, and I know I'm not Andre. Andre is here. We're very privileged to be here. I want to say thank you to the Brain Injury Association for allowing us to be here, both individually and on behalf of our firm. I want to thank Monty and Sherry and Mary Lou and Comfort Darren and everybody who helped us get here, helped us put this presentation together and let us be able to get this started. Andre's going to follow me after I go through a few things, and he's going to give you kind of the player's perspective. I'm going to go through some information on brain injuries, impact, and give you an overview and timeline of the NFL concussion litigation and kind of where we're at and what brought us here and what we have looking ahead. Okay. When we were asked to be here, I started to think, what are some of the things I'd want to talk about? And the first thing I remember was Darren and I having a conversation, and we were talking about our concussion docket and our cases, and the funny thing that always came to us was the stories, the personal stories, the actual human element of this injury. I mean, we still are shocked today by how deep and how intrusive, how personal this struggle is, how personal and how hard dealing with the injury is. And it's not only on the individual level, but also for the families. The families are the one. Is everyone okay? Back. So, picking back up, we noticed, it really affected the families, the family members. They are the ones that also suffer in this, okay? And it's such a stark contrast, because when we think of NFL athletes, when we think of the NFL, what do we think of? We think of fame, we think of power, prestige, we think of them being rich, we think of all of the glamour and all of the trappings that come with being a professional athlete, okay? But it is heartbreaking when you hear the daily lives and how much they're struggling. And because of that, we knew that we wanted to get involved. We knew that we wanted to represent these clients, but not only just to represent them, but we also felt that it was important. It was upon us to make sure that we not only helped our clients, but we also raised awareness. We educated ourselves. We put it out there. We let everybody know what the issues are. One of the things I wanted to start with in this was, sorry about that, was in 2015, the NFL conducted an injury data study. And they do this every year where they kind of break down what the injuries were and what happens and where most people get hurt. From 2014 to 2015, we noticed there was a 58% rise in concussions. Now, the interesting thing here that I want to mention in this is that this rise in concussions has a lot to do with the reporting. It has a lot to do with what we know. It has a lot to do with the information that we now have that we did not have before. In total, in 2015, we had 271 concussions. This number represents preseason, practices, regular season, and postseason, okay? And I want to drive this point home in terms of reporting, because it is interesting. Each year as goes by, we have more information. With more information, we have better protocols, we have better procedures, we have increased numbers and increased reporting. When you look at these numbers and you think 271, we were able to further break that down and do it by impact source. Okay? This is a very interesting statistic, and I'll tell you why. If you notice, we picked out 3 common ones, okay? The 3 most common. Shoulder to helmet represented 23 of the total number, okay, of reported concussions. Helmet to playing surface represented 29. And if you notice the guy in the picture, that's Mr. Andre. He was quick to point out that he held onto the ball in that picture as well. And maintained possession. So we know he was able to do that. But here's the one that we know, 91. But 91 out of the 271 concussions were helmet-to-helmet contact, impact source. Why is that important? This is the equivalent of 2 hard-charging rams hitting each other, okay? What we have to understand is this type of trauma, and what this diagram illustrates is this type of trauma shows that it is repetitive contact and impact is the type of thing that leads to this kind of accumulation, leads to some of these earlier onset neurocognitive disorders. Okay? The statistics are frightening. Okay? What we are beginning to learn is we don't need massive hits. We don't need massive trauma. We don't need massive impact. I shouldn't say trauma. We don't need massive impact. It's the accumulation of smaller hits, the accumulation of these repetitive blunt force impacts that, after time, start to lead to these types of the neurocognitive disorders that we were talking about. Athletes who've had 3 concussions, their chances for developing or having onset early Alzheimer's disease increases by 5-fold. 3 concussions. Okay? If you're an athlete, you've had at least 3 concussions, you're 5 times more likely to suffer from Alzheimer's later on in life. Okay? Now, Frontline published a study. This was a very interesting study. This study was conducted by the Department of Veteran Affairs, and it was conducted also in conjunction with Boston University. They studied 91 brains of deceased former NFL players. In the study, what they found was that 87 of these 91 were positive for brain disease. 87 of 91. But the other interesting fact that they found in this was that it was the repetitive, more minor head trauma in football that poses the greatest risk. Again, if you see me working with a theme, it's because I am. I'm trying to show you the dangers of what can happen in the day-to-day, in the actual part of the game. I mean, helmet-to-helmet contact is essential in the game. It's inherent in the game. It happens on every play. And these statistics are frightening. I mean, 87 out of 91 minor head trauma, the accumulation of minor head trauma. Now, you hear all these statistics, and I know most of us have an idea of what a concussion is. We've all heard the phrases, he got his bell rung, ooh, he got his clock cleaned, or there's no one home. And you know, we say that, but we have to look deeper into this. When you look at it, look at the difference in the size of these players. 190 pounds to 335. They're bigger now. They're bigger now. They're bigger and faster and stronger now, each play. Okay? What does this do? Why is this happening? Well, I know this might be elementary to some of the medical professionals in the audience, but for the lawyers and for us, here's a brief kind of understanding of what a concussion is. So I put on the diagram, what happens is our brain, which the consistency is kind of like soft butter or a slightly set gelatin would be kind of what the consistency of the brain is. And it is surrounded by spinal cerebral fluid, which protects it from the hard inner cavity of your skull. Anytime you have an impact or you face trauma, this brain hits up against your skull, and that's what causes the injury. Okay? It's this motion It's the brain hitting the inner cavity, was what causes the injury. So what are some of the areas that tend to be affected? Well, I know again, I put up a picture here. The main two areas we've noticed is frontal lobe and temporal. These are the areas that are affected primarily, okay? The frontal lobe is responsible for higher cognitive functions. Some of these you can see: problem solving, language, your motivation for coming and seeing us. Your temporal plays more of the emotional: smelling, tasting, perception, memory, understanding. I'm hoping you have a good feeling or a positive one when you walk out of here after hearing us speak. So, these are just to give you an example of the different areas and the different effects and what happens. Okay? What are some of the signs and symptoms? The interesting thing about concussions and these types of signs and symptoms is that some of these symptoms happen immediately. Some of them take days, some of them take weeks, some of them take months. And that's the scary part, because we don't know, right? We've heard people when they get hit, they're confused, they have headaches. We've seen people throw up, we know about nausea, slurred speech, but what are some of the delayed ones? These are the ones that go unnoticed. These are the stories that we hear. This is the stuff that we tie into our cases when we look into it. We have clients whose significant others and spouses tell us, he was never irritable. He used to never be depressed. He was always happy and smiling. You know what? This guy never sleeps anymore. Or this guy always sleeps. So we have, memory loss, I should say, is another one. And in the most severe cases, sensitivity to sound, light, distraction. Andre and I were talking earlier today about a former player named Al Toon, who I actually hosted Andre when he was during his recruitment time, and Al had to retire early because of concussions. And Al's in such a bad shape now that he can't even be in a room with lights on. It's so bad for him. Every day he wakes up, it's like he has a migraine headache. He suffers like this daily. He can't remember. And the other one that we feel is that we see that there's a lot of loss of taste of sensations. Loss of taste, smell. I can't taste things. They can't smell things. These are the types of things that they really affect these players. These guys, I will tell you, they're suffering. We're personal injury attorneys, and we represent hurt clients, okay? But when I tell you these guys are hurt, I'm telling you these guys are hurt. That Andre is going to tell you a little bit more about that, but it will shock you when you realize what their day-to-day lives are like and what the kind of things are that they have to deal with. So, kind of when I was looking for a segue from the science to kind of getting into the legal aspect of this, I thought to myself, like, well, what was the issue that brought this to the forefront? Like, how did we get here? And I began to realize that, wait a minute, it was all in the news. This is what started happening. We started hearing about this stuff everywhere you looked. Sports Illustrated, Daily News, players committing suicide. This got scary. Book, Legal Denial. I'm not sure if any of you have read this. If you haven't had an opportunity, I suggest to read it. It is a great read. It details with great specificity the struggle of how the NFL came across reporting the concussions, the protocol, how there wasn't any before, the resistance to the acceptance of the information, the resistance to or turning the blind eye to facts that were staring them in the face. Now, as most of us we don't know, the case currently has made its way through the district courts, it's made its way through the appeals, and it's now sitting in front of the Supreme Court. But how did we get to the Supreme Court? It all started back in 2002. This is Mike Webster. He's a 4-time Super Bowl champ, played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Hall of Famer. known as the best center in the game during his time. He played offensive line, and why I say that's important, offensive lineman 16 years. I've been mentioning it throughout the entire course of my talk here about repetitive contact. He got hit in the head 16 times, plus preseason, plus practices, plus whatever else he did college leading up, every game, every play. This is what happened to him for 16 years. He passed away at 50, age 50. He was widely known that he has been suffering from dementia. He was suffering from early onset Alzheimer's. He was living in his vehicle. This is a Hall of Famer, 4-time Super Bowl champ. Won 4 Super Bowls with Terry Bradshaw and the great Pittsburgh Steelers. He was living in his vehicle despite having offers from his children, his family, his friends to accept help. Nobody knows why. It's unfortunate. Now, with Mike Webster, what ended up, how he got brought into to the forefront was in the movie. I know most of us have seen this. It's been widely publicized. The movie Concussion. The basis behind this was Dr. Bennett Amalu was doing a study of 8 deceased players' brains, NFL retired players. And what he found, Mike Webster's brain was part of that. And what he found is, he noticed in Mike Webster's brain, the structural abnormalities and the diseased brain tissue, and what he was finding was very similar to those of boxers and to those who have had Alzheimer's. This was the first time he noticed that. And what this led to was the first ever diagnosis of CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. You can't say it. And Mike Webster was the first person to ever receive a diagnosis, and Dr. Bennett Amalu was the first person to ever give that diagnosis. Okay? All of this while this was in the news, I wanted to give you, to illustrate that the brain on the left is a healthy brain. The brain on your right is a diseased brain, which would be diagnosed with CTE. Look at that difference. Very sad story. Another one that was in the news, and this one really reverberated around the league. This is Dave Durson, also passed away at 50. Unfortunately, he did not die of natural causes. He committed suicide. He was so ill and suffering on such a level that in his suicide note, he shot himself in the chest so that his brain could be studied. He was also in the movie. Junior Seau, 2015 Hall of Fame inductee, a warrior, shot himself in the chest. Here's the recording of the 911 call. So that his brain could be donated for studying, because he believed that he was sick. All of this in the news, the different lawsuits that had started to get filed, led up to the 2012 first filing of the first unified lawsuit in this case. This was filed in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. It was the first time that we had all of the plaintiffs come together and file a unified lawsuit against the NFL and its NFL properties. And what they were alleging was they knew the risks and they failed to disclose. After a year and some months of negotiating, the two sides were able to come to an agreement. This is the mediator's written statement showing that they had come to an agreement for $765 million to be provided in a fund for the players and allow them to get compensation for this. However, interesting point, when the judge had the case in front of her and she looked at the numbers and she looked at the terms, she said, you know, this might be fine, but I'm not really satisfied. The settlement doesn't have enough money. So she sent him back to the negotiating table. And she said, hey, you guys need to figure this out. So they went back and they negotiated some more. And they put almost $250 million more into the fund. And they thought they had a settlement again in 2015. This time for $1 billion, upwards of $1 billion, not capped. And they were going to have payments and accept claims for 65 years. And the reason for the length was so that the players that were here, we would have enough time for them to submit their claims and ensure that if they met or were eligible under the terms of the settlement, that they would be able to bring their claim. However, just as they thought they had reached the goal line, just as I thought we were done, and just as I thought we were going to be able to set up and start making claims and payment of claims, the last appeals that you can do were filed. Now, let me give you just a brief explanation. After you've run out in the trial court stage, the last appeal that you can file is a petition for writ of certiorari, and what they're saying is, Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, please look at this. We believe that this settlement is deficient. Here are our reasons why. We feel that we are, whatever the reasons are, we want you to review this. Now, the first appeal, the one that you see up on the screen, is by the son of the late Cookie Gilchrist, former Buffalo Bills player. Scott Gilchrist brought this on behalf of the estate, and the main reason, or the basis of his argument, was that he believed that the estate, the people who are bringing claims upon the players that are no longer with us, were not adequately represented. Further, he mentions that not only were they not represented, the problem that we have here is that the science is not complete. The science is not concrete. Research is still out there. Research that's not been subject to expert testimony. Research that has not been subject to peer review. Research that has not gone through legal discovery. Research that has not stood up expert testimony and depositions and challenges. Okay? This is what he's asking the Supreme Court to do. He is saying, people who, like my father, who are similarly situated, who are no longer with us, are not represented in the same way and taken care of as the people who are. This wasn't the only appeal. There was another one. Raymond Armstrong. He filed an appeal basically on the same ground. However, he went a little bit further. The point of his appeal was that, look, whenever you have a settlement class or you have a class action, the importance of having equal treatment for all of the members, there is a heightened responsibility to it. Judges will not certify settlements unless they believe it passes this test. And what the analogy is, like, if most of us remember the 2000 election. Remember, hanging chads in one county counted as a vote versus a hanging chad in another county didn't. It's the same thing here. We cannot have certain players qualify for eligible benefits and not have others not, okay? And especially when they're similarly situated. The case that he used for his authority was, and this one was a Supreme Court case called Antrim. Now, the reason why this was important is because the court decertified the court could find no assurances either in terms of the settlement or the structure of the negotiations that the claimants were adequately represented. The second authority, which was Ortiz, again, invalidated a global class settlement, okay? And why they invalidated a settlement was because this one lacked structural protections to protect against potential conflicts. In both instances, in Antrim and in Ortiz, we have the U.S. Supreme Court striking down, one, decertifying a class because it felt that the negotiations were not adequately represented, and in Ortiz, not allowing a global settlement because he felt that there was not enough structural protections for the members of the class. Now, I want to drive this point home, and it's gonna lead into what Andre is going to talk about here. This is Ken Stabler with the late John Madden's also the late Ken Stabler. He played in the NFL, had a wonderful career. Towards the end of his career, he suffers. He suffered, and he passed away this year. Unfortunately, under the terms of the settlement in front of the Supreme Court right now, his family, I'm sorry, let me bring it back. The issue that we have here between this with Ken Stabler is, if you look here, the highlighted part, the stark disparity, it says a pre-settlement diagnosis of CTE is worth up to $4 million. However, post-settlement diagnosis is worth nothing. Ken Stabler's case is a post-settlement diagnosis because should the Supreme Court decide not to review the case, that the settlement is fine. Unfortunately, if they don't do anything, his family, who has suffered with him, who went through all of this, they are going to get nothing. This is the issue that the Supreme Court has, and it is stark, and it is a big one, and I hope that they do something. I would like to let Andre take it from here.
Good job.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great job, Ramesh.
Thank you.
He covered, excuse me one second. He did such a great job. It makes it difficult for me to even look at my notes because he takes me back through the Richter of this long journey and this battle against this big juggernaut company called the National Football League. I was blessed, I was very lucky and fortunate to play this game for a long time. Played for 12 years in the National Football League. Finished my career with Oakland Raiders and, through the ups and downs, I won Super Bowls, I've been MVP, I've been All-Pro, you name it, accolades, you name it. But there's a bigger story here. And I know we all have children, grandkids, nephews, nieces, because concussions don't just pertain to the game of football. You can get it in soccer, you can get it in volleyball, you name it, you can get it. I'd like to thank the Brain Injury Association for giving me this platform to bring some knowledge to the table about, from a player's perspective, about what I go through every day, my family, my kids, my wife, my friends and associates. It's serious and it's a real deal. And you as lawyers, you're gonna have many more cases that's gonna come across your table because you got so many great doctors and researchers that are finding the truth out and it's coming about. And so there are gonna be more cases tried on concussions than ever. And that's a great thing, that's a great thing. Just to give you a little detail about being a former player and the conditioning, the symptoms, it's scary. Junior Seau, who he showed earlier, was a great friend of mine. We played many games against each other. Him and I had many head-to-head collisions. I played offense, I had the ball. He played defense. His job was to come tackle me and get me down to the ground at all costs. Great guy. He left the earth too early. Dave Dorsey, same thing. Left too early. Mike Webster left too early. But that's not up to us, that's up to a higher power. And that's where that comes in. But from ground zero, there are things that can be very helpful to prevent these concussions and knowing how to deal with brain injury and things of that nature. Addiction is one of the first things that occurs because it's naturally occurring while you're playing. You're popping pills, you're trying to find some type of remedy to counteract the pain from the head, body pains, all that. We knew what we signed up for, but there was negligence sitting up under our feet. And that was the NFL not allowing us to know the information about head trauma. Billions of dollars are made by that company. We entertain the whole world. It's a game that we love. We loved it as a kid, we loved it as a fan, and then you're fortunate enough to get the opportunity to play it. And so you don't think twice because it changes your lifestyle. You can help your family overcome poverty, which 85% of the National Football League, those guys come from single parent homes, things of that nature. So it's life-changing experience. But at the same time, if you would have told us that I'm 49 and I'm sitting up here listening to Ramesh say he died at 50, he died at 50, he died at 50. Well, you gotta be crazy to think that I don't think about that every day, every night. When I would see my daughters run around, I have a son, he's one of the top players in the country. He's about to play collegiate football. I'm a high school coach, been there coaching for 15 years. So I think about it every day and every night, every day and every night. When is this gonna kick in? I've seen numerous of doctors, numerous of specialists, and come to find out, years into this case, we were being treated like cattle the whole time. NFL says, go see Dr. Smith, go see Dr. Thomas. Well, okay, no problem. We go see Smith, we go see Thomas. Well, guess who Smith and Thomas work for? They work for the National Football League. So when I get my test back, I don't know medical terms. I don't know things of that nature. So when I get my test back, I don't fit the criteria to receive benefits at all. So how are you gonna tell me I've had 14 concussions. Like I said, I had the ball a lot in my hands. I had over 700 something catches, over 10,000 something yards. That means you're working at your job. But I didn't know not for one time, 1 second, that when I retired, that I had this monster sitting here waiting on me, like called CTE, or who knows, the other injuries, the other medical terms that's gonna come out here in the near future. I didn't know that was sitting in my face. My peers didn't know it was sitting in their face. So when you sit out there in the crowd, I know a lot of times people say, well, you played the game. If you knew that was gonna happen, why did you participate? Well, we had no knowledge of it, just to clarify that. Because I see a lot of people's faces and eyes, and it's like, well, you played the game. Yeah, we played the game without the knowledge of it. So I just wanted to clear that up. The everyday effects. I got married after I retired, and it was something that I said I wanted to do, you know, just sitting on the couch, but not thinking that it would be so significant where the reason I got married was to change my life course and get on a different road and make that part of my medicine to heal my pains, my mental problems, or whatever it may be. And you say, well, how did that change it, Andre? Well, it changed it because when you're alone, and I heard someone speak earlier today about Michael Jackson dying alone. Junior Seau died alone. Mike Webster died alone. Dave Dorsett died alone. And there's a long list of other guys who didn't have the notoriety that this disease, this brain disease, took away from their families. And so, in my own world, in my own thought process, I said, it's time for me to be a better person and make my situation better, but at the same time, can I have this induce me to a situation where, okay, this is who I am now, and this helps me. And he said, well, I got married, we had 4 beautiful girls, 4 beautiful daughters, so it took my mindset on every day I had to wake up, I had responsibilities now. As opposed to me sitting in this box, and I'm so accustomed to getting up, going to work, and bashing my head against the other guy, and being this tough guy, those days were over. So it fit just right for me at the right time, because I do suffer from no sleep. I do suffer from the everyday headaches. People see me walk around with shades on. That's because if I stare at the light the wrong way, I'm done for probably the rest of the day. The migraine will kick in instantly. And I'm not the only one, and there's players that have way more severe symptoms right now as we speak than I. And you know, you sit there and you see this money, and say, okay, well, if you got Alzheimer's, you get this amount of money. If you get $4 million if you have CTE, right? Well, that money seems good, but if you're deceased, it does you no value. And then, if your families don't receive any, like Ken Stabler, and we see Ken and his beautiful family, and they receive no benefits from it, and he gave so much to the game. And so you find ways to adjust to life. And some guys, it's easier, and some guys, it's way more tough. I have so many friends that are alcoholics now. I have so many friends that I played with in the National Football League that are addicted to painkillers. You name it. You name it. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel. I was very fortunate. I had a lot of trust in God, some good friends around me. I found the right people to represent me, D. Miller and Associates. And God is good to good people. Now they represent 700 clients out of the National Football League. And that's a testament to them and their due diligence to their research and things of that nature. But when we talk about waking up in the morning and constant headaches, the fingers tingling, some days are better than others. You know, balance, eyesight, you name it. Mine was anger. Mine was anger and a slash of depression. Man, you know what? I shouldn't have spent that much money. You know what? I should have saved that. You know what? I shouldn't have hung with them. I should have hung with that group. I should have did this. I should have invested over there. And you relive your life all over again, and you're just 49 years old. And if you die, they said you died early. You were young. You were young. And so I just committed to myself and committed to these guys to go out and spread the message because, like I said, I'm a high school coach. I know the severity of concussions and brain injuries, and it is serious. And so thank you for this platform again, and hopefully, you know, I'll open the floor for questions or whatever. And thanks again to the Brain Injury Association and D. Miller and Associates and TBI.
Yes.
I have a question. What about your son, who's such a good player? Do you have any hesitation about him going on to play football?
Repeat the question, please.
She asked if he had any reservations about his son playing football.
As a high school coach, and he plays for me, it's a catch-22. He's a great kid, one of the top players in the country. He's graduated early. He's headed to Michigan State. He'll be an incoming freshman in January. Those are the things I'm concerned about. When it comes to football, there's a lot of luck involved. 3 weeks ago, he took a hit, and the kid went up under his legs, and he came down on his head, but he was too far away for me to see. And he went limp for a second. And so I dashed out on the field, and I caught eye contact with another coach from the other team, from the other side, because he had a better view, and he just looked at me. And the look he gave me, I got goosebumps now I'm speaking, because my son doesn't have to play football for me to love him. So I immediately got to the ground and caught eye contact with my son, and he looked at me, and I said, hey, I said, son, you all right? And his response was, yeah, Dad, I'm all right, it's my wrist. And that's the thing about football. You never know what it is until it's diagnosed. And he wasn't gonna tell me that he had a concussion. He wasn't gonna tell me that he hurt his head because he wanted to continue playing. And concussion protocol is a whole different ballgame now. It's way more advanced. Back in the day when I played, the concussion protocol was how many fingers I got up. If they had 2, you could say you had 6. Get back in the game, you know. So.
Just to further expand on that, I get that question a lot from other people about the players that we represent, and I will tell you the most common answer that we get. I'm lucky I have 3 girls, so I don't have the football question doesn't come up in our household. But you know, what they tell us is the padding is better, the equipment is better, the rules are better, and the protocol is better. But again, it's about choices and what you want. Yes.
I was just wondering, you represent 700 players. Are they all going through the class action process, or is it following any individual
No, it's all part of the process.
Thank you. Okay,
Well, we will be available for questions. Please stop by our booth. Andre will be there. I'll be there to answer some questions. If you'd like to take a picture or anything like that, we will be available as well. Thank you, everyone.
The deposition workshop is starting a little bit late, but it's starting in 5 minutes in our breakout room.